Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar called On the Map for Emergency Management for Response and Recovery During a Natural Disaster. We'll get started at 2:03 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks. Once again, thanks for joining our webinar this afternoon. We'll get started at 2:03 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you. Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now, I'd like to turn the call over to Ms. Kim Brown. Kim, you may begin.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the map for emergency management for response and recovery during a natural disaster. My name is Kim Brown, and I'm a training specialist here at the U.S. Census Bureau. I want to thank you for joining us today for the Back to Data Basics webinar series. The series was created by the Census Academy team here at the Census Bureau. You can register for any of the webinars at the Census Bureau's homepage. Just visit census.gov/academy. We think these webinars will be a valuable opportunity for you to learn from our experts about how to access and utilize a variety of Census Bureau data products, tools, and resources. Before I introduce today's speaker, let's go over a few important housekeeping rules. As mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. For your convenience, it will be posted to the Census Academy site within 30 business days. We'll post all supplemental materials, including the PowerPoint slides as well. In terms of how to ask questions during the webinar, you can submit your written questions using the Q&A panel, which is at the bottom center or right side of your WebEx screen. Please take a moment to locate that now. Once you found the Q&A panel, make sure you choose All Panelists from the drop-down menu. This will ensure we see your question. Don't send your question to an individual panelist. We also ask that you do not include any personal or business identifiable information with your questions. Now, let's talk about the chat panel. Look for that on your screen now. It's probably right next to the Q&A panel. Definitely keep that chat panel open also because this is where we will provide key links and other resources. Keep in mind, you won't be able to respond to the chat. Chat is just for us to send your links and other resources. In the chat box, we will be sharing throughout the webinar the link to our evaluation. We are very interested in hearing from you how we're doing. My colleagues, Patrick Hayward and Carol Miller, will be monitoring the Q&A. As time allows, we will answer your question directly through the Q&A panel, or we will share your question with the presenter to respond to after the presentation. If we don't get to all questions with a response during the webinar, we will post the questions and responses with the materials within 30 business days. Lastly, near the end of the webinar, we'll put into the chat the link to the evaluation so you can tell us how we did today. We hope you take the time to complete, as we are always looking for ways to improve our training. As you know, we are in a virtual environment and sometimes technical difficulties might occur. If you are having issues, try a different browser such as Chrome, or consider logging out and coming back into the session. If you are having audio issues, try selecting the computer audio or calling into the webinar via phone. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker, my colleague, Erlene Dow. Erlene, you may begin.
Thank you, Kim. Good afternoon, everyone. As Kim said, my name is Erlene Dow, and I've been promoting the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics program for over 12 years. Today, we will be covering OnTheMap for emergency management for response and recovery during a natural disaster. Here's the agenda of how we will spend the next hour. First, we will do a brief overview of the U.S. Census Bureau and Census Economic Surveys. Then we'll cover the LEHD program and all of its data products. And finally, we will cover what we are here to talk about, OnTheMap for emergency management. And then we can take questions after. The Census Bureau is the federal government's largest of 17 statistical agencies, where we conduct over 130 surveys each year. Some of our well-known surveys are listed here. First on the list, many people recognize the decennial census, which takes place every 10 years, and it counts the population and housing. Next is our American Community Survey, which is a yearly survey on the nation's population. From the business data side of the house, we have the economic census that measures American businesses. For the public sector's counterpart of the economic census, we have the Census of Governments. This is the official 5-year measure of the nation's state and local government sector. Our mission is to serve as the leading source of quality data. So with that, it may be helpful to know the structure of our data releases. We have a range of release frequencies from decennial to quinquennials, annuals, and monthlies. It's good to note that there is an inverse relationship between this frequency of releases and the level of details. So, for instance, the economic census takes place every 5 years, and it's the most comprehensive source for business data, while the annual surveys are more timely. The level of details are reduced. We have 17 monthly and quarterly surveys. Monthly and quarterly surveys include programs that serve as the key economic indicators. And we have 20 economic surveys that are released annually. Because the economic census is our largest undertaking for business data and takes place every 5 years in the years ending in 2 and 7. The 2022 economic census is right around the corner. The survey will be conducted in 2023, with businesses reporting their 2022 year-end numbers. Now we'll look at the LEHD program and where the data comes from. LEHD products are different from other census data in the fact that our data comes from our Local Employment Dynamics, or LED partnership, which is a voluntary federal-state partnership. Its main purpose is to merge employee data and employer data to produce a collection of enhanced labor market statistics with state-of-the-art confidentiality protection. Under the partnership, States send their unemployment insurance wage records and their quarterly Census of Employment wage data, which is then combined with censuses and surveys to create this dynamic information on workers to produce public use data products as well as microdata for research. The UI records give us job data, the QCEW gives us firm data, and our person data comes from censuses and surveys. Currently, LEHD has 3 main data sets and 2 experimental data sets. Each data set has an application for easy access. If you are curious about employment, hires, separations, turnovers, and earnings, you would look at our quarterly workforce indicators, or QWI, utilizing the QWI Explorer or the LED extraction tool. If you want to look at employment for detailed and customized geography, you would look at the loads data using the OnTheMap or OnTheMap for Emergency Management data tools, and coming next year in the LED extraction tool. OnTheMap for Emergency Management is the only data that's part of the LEHD suite of tools that has population data, along with data from other federal agencies. If you want to look at statistics on job mobility across state boundaries or industries, transitions between jobs by timing and firm or worker characteristics, or earnings changes due to job changes, you would use our job-to-job or J2J flows data using the J2J Explorer, and coming soon in the LED extraction tool. One of our newer data sets is the Postsecondary Employment Outcomes, or PSEO. This experimental data set reports earnings by institution, degree field, degree level, and graduation cohort for 1, 5, and 10 years after graduation, and is accessible through the PSEO Explorer. The current release includes 23 participating states with details from 660 schools. Finally, we have another experimental data set called the Veteran Employment Outcomes, or VEO. This experimental data set reports earnings and employment outcomes for U.S. Army veterans 1, 5, and 10 years after discharge by military occupation, rank, demographics, industry, and geography of employment. This is also accessible through our VEO Explorer. In addition to the data tools, raw data downloads are available along with the LEHD microdata for approved projects through our secure census research data centers. OnTheMap for Emergency Management is a public data tool that provides an intuitive web-based interface for accessing U.S. population and workforce statistics in real time for areas being affected by natural disasters. The tool allows users to retrieve reports containing detailed workforce, population, and housing characteristics for hurricanes, floods, wildfires, winter storms, and federal disaster declaration areas. Our hurricanes, tropical storms, snowfall, freezing temperature, and floods all come from NOAA. Our disaster declaration areas come from FEMA. Our wildfires come from the Department of Interior and the Department of Agriculture, and our demographic and economic data comes from the Census Bureau's 2010 decennial, the American Community Survey, and the LEHD loads dataset. OnTheMap for Emergency Management has comprehensive reports, real-time data updates, it's easy to use, it can look at historical events, and flexible analyses and visualizations. OnTheMap for Emergency Management has been named mission critical by the Department of Commerce. That means if anything should happen, such as a shutdown, the application will continue to be available to the public. In 2020, for the first time in history, all 50 states were declared federal disaster declaration areas due to COVID-19. But at the same time, the pace of hurricanes, floods, wildfires, and winter storms continue to affect communities already dealing with the pandemic emergency. To help users identify and focus on specific events other than COVID-19, each natural disaster was organized and grouped by individual threats and clearly displayed on the map. This is a screenshot from today. You can see on the left side a list of current events. To the right is a legend of events along with your choice of base map. And you can also zoom into Alaska and Hawaii. And the actual map in the middle of the screen is showing all of the activities for today, which are a few tropical storms, some wildfires, a little bit of flood, and a disaster declaration area. According to an article in the Washington Post, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, announced that at least $20 billion disasters occurred in the U.S. in 2021. From tornadoes to floods, fires, and hurricanes, the year featured a number of catastrophes. The 2021 billion-dollar disasters include exceptional heat and drought in the western states, a rash of wildfires, a punishing cold snap in Texas, 4 tropical storms and hurricanes, and 8 severe thunderstorms and tornado events. The combination of heat, drought created tinderbox conditions for wildfires in the western states. The year ended with the Marshall Fire near Boulder, Colorado, which was the most destructive in the state history. Occurring after an unusually warm and dry fall with hardly any snow, it damaged or destroyed more than 1,000 homes and businesses. OnTheMap for emergency management can assist in identifying vulnerabilities, social vulnerabilities, physical vulnerabilities, and economic vulnerabilities. Using the ACS, we can see social and physical vulnerabilities. We can also see households with 1 or more people 65 years or over. We can see if they are disabled, and we can see house heating fuel or year structure was built, to name a few physical vulnerabilities. Using the decennial data, we can access the physical vulnerabilities, whether a house is occupied or vacant. And to understand the economic vulnerabilities of the event using the loads data, we can look at total number of workers in the impacted area, the industry impacted in the area, and earnings for money lost to the workers in the impacted area. So here we are looking at an example from the Marshall Fire, and let's go live to work this example out. So the easiest way to get to OnTheMap for emergency management is if you just type in OnTheMap, one word, and for emergency management. And then the link should be at the top, and we can click on there. So just as the screenshot you saw earlier, we have all of the different events on the left side, and you can see as I hover over each area, I could click on this and it'll take me straight to the event. And then here we talked about how you can change the base map to a satellite, road, or hybrid. And then again, you can zoom into Alaska and Hawaii. And then if you wanted to, you could click on any of these events in the middle on the map, and then it'll take you straight to where we need to go. So I'm going to do Marshall Fire, and I'm going to just type it into the search. And then here in the filter, I can click on the arrow, and then I can unclick tropical storms, I can unclick floods, winter weather, disaster, and COVID-19. And as you can see, Marshall Fire comes up right away. So it tells us what the selection area is, so what was affected by the wildfires, and then it can tell us the affected population. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And then it zooms us in to that area. And then you can see all of the different characteristics that we have. So looking at the social vulnerabilities, we can look at disability status by poverty. And we can see income in the past 12 months at or above poverty level. And you can see that the map also updates. We can look at population 65 years and over living in the area. And if I click on the area, then again, it updates on the map. And then we can look at the decennial, and we can click on the topic, and it'll take us to the 2010 decennial. And again, we can see what the total is for the population in that area. And then we can look at the housing. and we can see which homes are owned and occupied and which homes are being rented. All right, moving on. We're looking right now at the floods in California and Louisiana. So a more subtle and localized flood disaster struck Louisiana in mid-May, costing $1.4 billion. It forced at least 250 water rescues as upward of 15 inches of rain fell. And the hardest hit were Baton Rouge and Lake Charles, the latter of which was continuing to deal with the aftermath of Category 4 Hurricane Laura and Category 2 Delta, which hit back to back during the summer and fall of 2020. So let's look at this example to look at the social and economic vulnerabilities again, and we can go ahead and do that really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the map. I'll just go ahead and refresh. And instead, I'm going to type in the DR, which is 4606. And then it comes up automatically again. And then it zooms into the area for the flood. And then again, we can do the same things. We can look at the poverty status in the past 12 months, which was about 191,107. We can look at those Social Security income in past 12 months. See that. And then regarding flood, this is something that a lot of people don't always think about, but regarding vehicles that might be, washed away from a flood. So we can see those that have one vehicle, two vehicles, all the way up until 5 vehicles, which is a lot of vehicles for one person. Okay, and I did want to show this. So if I click on this disaster declaration DR 4606 link, it takes us straight to FEMA, and you can see that it was the Louisiana severe storms, tornadoes, and flooding. And then I'm going to show you something, and then we'll come back to it. So I'll go ahead and click on this Google Earth of the location, and I'll just let that sit there for a while. All right, moving on to the weather. In mid-February, leading to a once-in-a-generation cold event in Texas that knocked out power to 10 million people. Residents suffered through the coldest air mass to visit since 1989, with temperatures some 40 degrees below normal. Once again, let's go live to look at the millions of people who lost power by city. On the map for emergency management allows you to dive deep into the geography. So we can look at states, counties, and places or cities. And Houston dipped to 13 degrees, Dallas to a -2, and Galveston even saw thunderstorms and snow. So again, I'll go ahead and refresh. And then I will type in the DR for this. And again, it just says Texas and Louisiana, pops right back up. And then we can see the areas. So in this part, I'm going to show you how you can change the analysis area. So the article talked about Houston, Galveston, and Dallas. So I can go ahead and click on, I clicked on the event area under analysis area. Now I have a geography selection, and then I will do geography type, which we will look at places. And once I do that, you can see all of the different areas that was affected, and I'll just click on Houston City and select that. And then it zooms into Houston, and it gives us all of the information again regarding Houston. So we're looking at 2,276,502 people affected. and we can look at all of the different things again. But here, let's look at the house heating fuel because many were without electricity. And we can see that in Houston, about 558,231 were affected. Same as the other DR, you can click on this and it'll take you straight to FEMA. So finally, the tropical trouble. The 2021 Atlantic hurricane season brought 21 named storms, exhausting the list of available storm names for only the third time on record. Hurricane Ida was by far the worst of that group. Ida brought both a flood and severe thunderstorm disaster to the Northeast and a wind and storm surge disaster to Southeast Louisiana. Ida was the year's costliest event with damages of $75 billion, ranking the fifth most expensive hurricane on record. So again, here is a screenshot of Hurricane Ida. So let's go live to look at Hurricane Ida and look at the economic vulnerabilities. So I will refresh one more time. And in the search, I will type in Hurricane Ida. And it automatically comes up. I don't have to use the filter to maneuver through it. So again, it tells us all the selection areas that were affected by Hurricane Ida and what the population was. So here, I'm going to go ahead and change the topic to our loads data, and we're going to look at the workforce employed in the event area. And then we can see what the total workers' ages are. We can see what their educational attainment is. So we can see what, some of the workers that have high school or equivalent to. We can look at workers by earnings. So if we, take more than 3,333 per month times 756,495, that's about 2.5 billion earnings that could be affected by Hurricane Ida. We can look at the next industry that was affected. So scrolling down, you can see right away that 15% of the workers in that area were healthcare and social assistance. You can see that they were in retail trade, also was the second largest, and then accommodation and food services was the third largest. We can see the worker race if you want to. And then there's information regarding ethnicity and worker sex. One more thing I wanted to show you before I left this page. I'm going to go ahead and show you this timeline. So while the hurricane is moving up the coast, we can see it move. So we can look at Friday, 27th of August, and it's here in the middle, passing Havana. We can look at Saturday, August, and it's going up the Gulf. The 29th, it hits land. And then on the 30th, this is where it ends up. So when looking at OnTheMap for emergency management, you have to look at the sister map OnTheMap. OnTheMap can tell you the workforce population of the impacted area during the day. And we needed data to tell us where the people were during the day, and OnTheMap connects where the people live and where they work. So during Hurricane Ida, again, the Grand Isles is outside the state's protection system that suffered severe destruction. So they needed new strategies for better protection. Grand Isles is a barrier island at the southern tip of Louisiana. So let's go live to look closer at this selection. So the great thing about OnTheMap for emergency management, it has a direct link here in the right-hand corner. So I'm going to click on OnTheMap. And then I'm going to go ahead in the search box and I'm going to type in Grand Isles. And I'll click on search. Once I do that, all of the different geographies that have Grand Isles pops up, but we want to look at Grand Isles Town, LA or Louisiana, not Los Angeles. So anyway, we have Grand Isles Town. We can see what the selection area is, how many square miles, how many census blocks, and all of our data tools are very intuitive. So you're going to look at this pop-up and say, I should click on this perform analysis on selection area. Once you do that, it takes us to an analysis setting. So the first column, you can see there's home and work. So we can look at where the worker lives or where the worker works. It automatically defaults to work. Then under the analysis type, we can see all of the different analyses that are available here on the settings. So we can see that area profile is an overview of the whole selected area. Area comparison, you can compare different geographies along with the labor market segments. Distance direction tells you what regions they are coming from, the workers are coming from to work in the selected area, and how many miles they're traveling. You can look at destination, which tells you what type. So we can see, if I click on this arrow, we can look at what counties people are coming from, the zip codes, the metropolitan areas, and all the way down to the census tract and more. And then the inflow outflow tells us how many people are traveling into the area to work, how many people live and work within the area, and how many people travel out of the area to work. Under the year, you can actually decide to pick 2019, 2018. You can do as many years as you'd like, just to kind of look at the different trends that are happening. And then under job type, the all jobs is every single job out there. If you have more than one job, perhaps you have a couple part-time jobs, that's where that would be. Under primary jobs is the job that brings home the most income. And then all private jobs and private primary jobs are the same, except that it's just private jobs. So I'm going to go ahead and click on all jobs just for fun. And then just to let you all know that if you need to know what everything is, we have little question marks and bubbles. If you hover over that, it gives you a definition or some details regarding what is there and what is available. So I'm going to go ahead and click this bold go with the exclamation point with the lightning bolt. And then it zooms into the map and the selected area. And we can see that this is the Grand Isles, which is, on this little peninsula, and that there are only 241 workers there, but I want to see how many people are traveling in and out. So I'll go here to the left side under change settings. It takes me back to the analysis settings. I'll click on inflow outflow, click on the go again. And then we can see this. So we can see 199 people travel into the area to work, 42 live and work in the area, but then there are 324 people that travel out of the area to work. So that's pretty interesting. And then here in the left-hand side, you can see all of these outputs. So you can click on the detailed report. It'll give us a PDF, an Excel, or an HTML. You can also export the geography, and you can print chart map. So before I change it up, I wanted to show you, because if you remember, I clicked on that KML. So we're going to do that. We're going to choose file. It goes into the file. I'll click on the 4586. And then I'll import it. This one's taking a little longer. All right. Oh, sorry. I did Texas instead of the other one. So anyway, here is the KML shapefiles from FEMA. And we can go ahead and select all polygons, or I would just like to just kind of click on this little area here. So I've clicked on a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and continue with selected features. And then it brings me to the Advanced tab. And I'm just going to keep it simple. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Confirm Selection. Gives me the pop-up again. And then I'm just going to keep it at Area Profile. And now we can see on the selected area that I picked, there are 256,728 workers. We can look at the worker age. We can look at their earnings. We can look at the different NAICS industry. And here's something that's kind of cool too. It's very interactive. So if I want to just look at retail trade, the map actually updates to just retail trade. And then we can look at worker educational attainment, worker sex, and ethnicity and race. But it does so much more, but this is all about on the map for emergency management. So I'm going to keep it there. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your time and spending the day with me. And here are some links on for OnTheMap for the help and documentation. It kind of walks you through how to use it, as well as OnTheMap. And at this time, I'm ready for your questions, and Heath Hayward and I will answer them to the best of our knowledge. Kim, are there any questions? Or
Yeah, there's a few
Carol?
questions.
Oh,
So,
okay, Heath.
Here's one. Someone's asking, how could we save an image of what's on the map instead of a shapefile for PowerPoints?
You go.
For that, so there's not a specific export for images in the tool. I would recommend doing a screen grab, just using your whatever operating system you're in. You can usually do that. There's also a variety of different screen grab tools out there. We use Snagit often whenever I'm trying to grab an image from the tool. So there should be ways that you can grab a screenshot from your browser. Let's see, what other... is there a limit to the size of the imports that we can upload? There is a limit. So with the, and this is for, I assume this is for the OnTheMap tool. There is a limit. I can't remember exactly the number of, I think it's counted as the number of vertices in your shapefile. What I recommend, because you can only grab a single, you're using that shapefile as a single area, you're not actually loading a shapefile with a bunch of features. So what I recommend is cleaning up your shapefile to where it's just a single feature, loading that in. And that shouldn't be a problem. But if you're trying to load, you know, a bunch of different shapefiles, then I would recommend downloading the loads data and doing it yourself. Let's see. Can you share the links to the maps from the slide in the chat? Let's see. Yeah, could somebody just, I guess that's the links to the different data tools. I think somebody could post that into the chat.
It also, I mean, like it will be part of the PowerPoint because that one slide that we had earlier has all that information, but we can definitely do that.
So there's the link to OnTheMap for emergency management. And then the link to map is just the same exact thing, but with /em. Another question, in the Grand Isle example, 42 residents versus 300 plus commuting out of Grand Isle to work. Are the 300 plus folks temporarily living in Grand Isle and not permanent residents?
So that one, you know, I went ahead and clicked on all, which includes people that have more than one job. So the number is not accurately 300 and such that it was. But it is the people that live within the island.
Here's another question. If there are tribal lands included in a disaster area, can we see the footprint of the tribal lands within or adjacent to the disaster? So that's based on what you can see in the reference map. So when you click on a particular disaster declaration area, you should be able to see various areas, different geographies that sit underneath. For example, zooming in on New Mexico and Arizona, it does look like some tribal lands are shown. We don't have control over those, the base map that is sourced from Google. So whatever is included with the service that we get from Google Maps will show up as a reference.
Plus, you can also see whether underneath the population, you can see the Native Americans, both population and workforce.
Here's a question about the post-secondary employment outcomes. Question about, do we think that this will expand to include more schools? And initial view indicates that seems to be public institutions. So yes, currently we are adding institutions every year. Usually in the spring, we add more institutions, more state partners. And then in the fall, there's an update to add additional graduation cohorts. Right now, because it's so challenging to have separate MOUs with private institutions, I think the system of adding in new schools comes through school systems. So usually big chunks of schools come in together. But we are actively adding more and more schools as we go along. And I can let me put a link to the chat. And you can see a little map that shows current coverage. So right now we're at about 25% coverage of students. The next ones that are going to be coming in are institutions in Minnesota, Oklahoma.
Keith?
Yes.
Oh, you just got quiet.
Next question is, when will the 2021 data be released? There's about a 3-year time. I'm assuming that's for the loads data. I did answer this question earlier, but there will be an update to OnTheMap for emergency management sometime early fall, and we plan to add in all 3 of the data sources at the same time. So we'll be adding in 2020 decennial, the next release of the ACS 5-year estimates, and the 2019 loads data. So the 2019 loads data is sort of what's holding this back a little bit. There's just a long lag time with loads data. We're trying to get it less and less, but really there's often a 2 to 3 year lag for getting loads out the door. And that's something that's certainly on our plate as a research goal, is to try to figure out ways to make that faster.
Hey, do you want me to read some of the questions too?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not really sure where you're at, but I'm going from the top. Would it be possible to get the slides after the presentation? Yes, it's going to be posted on our Census Academy. The demographic and economic data is only from the 2010 census, not the 2020. That was answered verbally just now. Let's see the other one. Oh yeah, she said thanks. I see a lot of them have been answered, actually.
Yeah. Let me just keep going with my.
Okay.
So a
Sure,
question
sorry.
down
Trying to
from Shirley. Would this be a real-time update for ongoing incidents? So yes, the event data is updated automatically through the web service, the reader that goes out to all the different federal agencies that are the subject matter experts for these different emergency events. And that goes out every 4 hours, goes out and searches for new events or updates to the existing events. So the events are real time pretty much every 4 hours. But then obviously the employment data, housing data, all that stuff is a couple of years old. So keep that in mind when you're taking a look at this. Next question, there's one from Brett. What level of NAICS does this go down to? So that just depends on the data product. For loads data, it goes to the NAICS sector level. Not exactly sure. Erling, do you know when using Decennial or ACS what level of NAICS you can go down to?
I well, if we're using OnTheMap for emergency management or in general. In general, it's 6.
Right, but in our emergency management.
Oh. I don't think there's any questions regarding NAICS in it for the American Community Survey.
Okay.
Other than us for 2-digit.
Here's a question. Is there a way to determine modes of transportation into and out of the area? We do not have that information in the loads data. Remember, this is administrative record data, at least the loads side of it. So we don't actually know that someone is making that trip. We know that someone lives in a particular census block, and we know that their employment location is in another, or potentially the same census block, but often another. This tool doesn't really know anything about work location or teleworking or remote work. So that's going to be a challenge going forward with more and more of the workforce going remote. But historically, we've not been able to. So think about a construction worker, for example, doesn't go to the place that pays him, right? Doesn't go where he goes to pick up his check. He goes to a work site or a traveling salesman or someone like that. So it's important to know that we don't know that someone, they're not telling us like in a survey that they actually make this commute. This is a administrative record commute. Here's a question. Can we bring our own GIS files into OnTheMap for emergency management like we can for OnTheMap? No, that's not possible at this time. I already answered a question. 2020 decennial will be added later this fall with the other data sets. Question about Spanish. We do not have this information available in Spanish. I do believe that ACS and Decennial do have some resources for their data in Spanish, but not in this particular tool. And then the last one that I see from Calvin Green, could you possibly show how we might get information on the flooding event in St. Louis the other day?
Do you want me to go to the map or?
Yeah. I mean, it looks like there should be. Looks like there are some flooding events in St. Louis.
All right, let's go back to.
Yeah,
Will
you
it
could,
take me? Will
yeah,
it take me there?
the emanator on the left-hand side down at the bottom,
Okay.
your area you're looking for.
Okay, thank you. So there we have it, the information. And we're looking at the American Community Survey for the 2015-2019. We can see all of the different characteristics. Is there anything specific we were looking at? I don't know. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Right. Yes, we can.
So it looks like that's all of the questions in the chat.
Great. Kim?
Thank you, Earlene. Thank you, Heath. We appreciate your taking the time to answer the questions for everyone. We'd like to thank you very much for this excellent presentation. Before we conclude, I'd like to thank everyone who played a role in today's webinar. And also, of course, thank you, our audience, for spending your time with us this afternoon. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation by following the link provided in the chat. Look out for the recording and the PowerPoint along with other materials on the Census Academy site at census.gov/academy. We want to remind everyone that the next webinar in this series is called Women in Minority-Owned Businesses and Entrepreneurs. That's to be held Thursday, August 4th at 2 p.m. This brings us to a close, so we thank you again and hope you have a great afternoon.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.